Now, this is an interview of George Lincoln Rockwell, who was a former naval commander, on Canadian television. This interview, he was a decorated naval commander. He served in World War II, and he served in the Korean War. And this video here is provided for educational purposes only. I will give as little commentary as popular. Or not as popular. I will give as little commentary as possible, but I do want to give commentary where commentary is due to explain certain contexts. But what I want people to understand, this video here might be a video series. I think I might have to do this in more than one video. I'm going to explain the book of Job, the conquest of Canaan, and the everybody keeps saying Israel has a right to exist. Israel is the land of the Jewish people. Israel is this. Israel is that. Technically, no. Unless we believe in stuff like, and now remember, the United States is what? The United States is a secular republic. Now, I already went over Yahwism and how Yahwism is nothing but a Canaanite religion like any other Canaanite religion. Now, I'm going to get into, in this video series, most likely it'll be a series, about how the Torah was used to justify the massacre and genocide of the Canaanites. And this is not made up, this is in the Bible. I get very frustrated. My grandfather was an Episcopal minister. I get very frustrated arguing with Christian Zionists that just simply do not grasp the Bible. It's almost as though every Christian I have ever met has never read the frickin' Bible. It makes you wonder what the hell is going on in American churches. But I'm going to begin this video now. This is a interview with former Naval Commander George Lincoln Rockwell.
Commander George Lincoln Rockwell, you are head of the American Nazi Party?
Yes, sir.
How can you possibly justify leading an organization whose objectives are the liquidation of the Jews, the removal of the Negroes to Africa, and the turning of the United States into a fascist state?
Well, I don't know where you got those supposed objectives, but they're ridiculous.
Now, I want you to take note of that, how he pointed out that the objectives are utterly ridiculous. You will notice again and again and again how the interviewer tries to make Mr. Rockwell, he does put him on the defense. But what he is trying to do is to make it look like Mr. Rockwell is an unrepentant anti-Semite and hateful, and nothing but a hateful maniac that wants to hurt everybody that isn't like him. Now, anybody that is familiar with the writings of Mr. Rockwell and with the work of Mr. Rockwell knows that the opposite is pretty much the truth. But let's go on.
We have no such objectives, as you have said. We are not out to liquidate the Jews. We are out to liquidate communist traitors. Unfortunately, too many Jewish atheists, not religious Jews, but too many religious atheist Jews are mixed up in communism. That's our only concern with the Jews. And as for turning us into a fascist nation, that's untrue too. Fascism is essentially an economic doctrine that has to do with a corporate state. We don't believe in a corporate state. We believe in free enterprise. What we are is Nazis, which means basically that we are racists. We believe in preserving a white nation, a white Christian nation, for the white Christian people who built it.
Well, now let's deal with the Jews first and the Negroes second. Are you happy with that order?
Any way you want to deal with them.
How would you deal with them, Commander?
I think we'll deal with them simultaneously when we get our chance.
How do you mean?
Well, I think that the Negroes, who have done nothing wrong, in my opinion, except recently, but they did no wrong by coming here. We dragged them here, and I think we owe them something. I think we owe them a chance in their own nation in Africa.
Then you do intend to deport the Negroes to Africa?
You keep saying these things, sir, not me. Not deport them.
Now again, notice he keeps trying to put words in his mouth. None of this is accurate to the at the time proposed policies of Mr. Rockwell's party.
Those who wish to may remain here on reservations like the Indians were. Those who will of their own volition, accept our help, will be aided to go over to Africa and build their own nation as our ancestors, and yours, I might say, came over here and did in America.
Now, the Jews, you say about 80% of them are communists and traitors.
You keep adding this stuff. I don't know whether it's 80%. I don't know what
Commander,
percentage.
what percentage would you estimate?
My estimate has been regularly about 80% based on the number.
Now, if you notice the smirk on the interviewer's face, he likes that he seems to be getting a reaction out of Rockwell. Now, he's not getting a reaction out of Rockwell. Rockwell is somebody with a very type A personality. That's not much of a reaction for Mr. Rockwell. But watch again, look at the shit-eating grin on this person's face.
Africa and build their own nation as our ancestors, and yours, I might say, came over here and did in America.
Now, the Jews, you say about 80% of them are communists and traitors.
You keep adding this stuff. I don't know whether it's 80%. I don't know what
Commander,
percentage.
what percentage would you estimate?
My estimate has been regularly about 80% based on the number of traitors who have been convicted in this country and your country and England and other countries.
All right. What do you intend to do to those Jews who you believe are communists or traitors?
The Constitution provides that. The Constitution of the United States, is written by the Founding Fathers, says death is the penalty for treason. I believe that. That's the only way to deal with a traitor. I think they should be placed before American juries, in American courts of law, federal...
Now take note of this. What he is saying is that these people need to be tried fairly in U.S. courts by U.S. juries of their peers, and be found innocent or guilty based on the law. And that is not that extreme of a view, now is it?
Courts, and if they're convicted by a law of treason, I think they should be executed.
What's your view of the way that Hitler dealt with the Jews of Germany?
I think Hitler dealt with the Jews of Germany the same way he dealt with all traitors, the same way we will. I think he has been lied about more than any human being in history except Jesus Christ.
Do you, in fact, accept what has been established by many
Are you going to get the violin out now and play me about the 6 million dead Jews?
That's just what I'm coming up to. But I'm going to put
that.
Do you or do you not?
Well, let me tell you a little story.
That 6 million Jews were exterminated by Hitler.
Of course not. I have incontrovertible documentary.
Now, what you're going to see is, as I get into... Now, I'm not saying that 6 million Jews were not killed by Hitler. I personally don't know. I wasn't there. But what I am going to show is that the Torah allows and commanded the extermination of the Canaanites. What you see going on right now in Palestine, in Gaza, is an extermination, a genocide of the Palestinian people by the Zionists in Israel. Okay?
Proof that that's not true. I don't know how many Jews there were in Germany. I think I heard there were 600,000. And if the percentage is anything like I think it's over here, I don't think they were exterminated, but I would imagine probably as many as 500,000 probably had to be dealt with as traitors, according to law, as there will be here.
Well then, if 500,000 Jews, or thereabouts in your view, and this is about 1/12 of the estimate which is accepted by everybody else, if 500,000 were exterminated,
wait a minute. Did we exterminate the Rosenbergs, sir? Do you call that exterminating them?
Well,
Now, this is very important to understand, because people like to point out, oh, poor Jonathan Pollard was put in prison for spying for Israel and stealing U.S. secrets. Oh, the poor people that orchestrated the Lavon affair were hung in Italy for attacking U.S., British, and Egyptian civilians. These people do not deserve mercy. These are murderers and traitors. Okay? Without the Rosenbergs, who knows, the Ruskies still might not have atomic weapons, and we might not even be in the situation we're in with the Ruskies at the moment.
wait a minute, Commander, you know that it has been thoroughly established by all the courts which have looked into the question, by the governments of the United States, of Great Britain, of the Soviet Union, which have looked into the question.
And you believe the Soviet Union, sir?
That in fact,
wait a minute,
there were
extermination
extermination
camps.
camps.
The Soviet Union comes. Let's stop now, right there. How about that Soviet Union? They sat on the International Court of Justice at Nuremberg. Do you believe in the Soviet justice?
Do you disbelieve in the evidence accumulated by your own government of the United States and by the government of Britain as
I
well
believe
as
in
the
what
Soviet
the FBI
Union?
accumulated, sir, but the FBI has not accumulated that. The people that accumulated that so-called evidence were mostly Jewish army officers who I believe were not working for the United States. They're working for Israel and Russia and the Soviets.
Do you model yourself on Hitler?
It's impossible. I look upon Hitler. If I were religious, I would say Hitler was the second coming of Christ. I think Hitler was a gift from Providence. I think he was so far above anything that I'll be able to accomplish that it's just almost sacrilegious for me to speak of myself in the same terms with Hitler.
But this is your objective, to model yourself as closely as possible.
No, my objective is to carry out what Hitler started, not to model my own person on Hitler, because this is impossible.
Now, what's so humorous is what you see with Mr. Rockwell is you obviously see Mr. Rockwell is far more of a type A personality than Mr. Hitler was. Okay? You also see Mr. Rockwell's behavior, his candidness, the way he speaks, far, far, far different than Hitler's. Okay? And if you ever hear any of Hitler's private conversations, Mr. Rockwell carries himself far more aggressively, far more with a type A personality, and in a far more driven manner than Mr. Hitler did, if you understand what I'm saying. So Mr. Rockwell is not mimicking Hitler or pretending to be Hitler. Now, there was a gentleman, Colin or Colin or something of that nature, who actually was Jewish, that was the leader of an American Nazi party. I think it was the National Socialist White People's Party or something of that nature. Now, he tried to model himself after Hitler to the point where he even had a silly little mustache and everything. It was absolutely, utterly ridiculous. And you will see a lot of Jewish people do that. They try to model themselves after Hitler. They join these Nazi groups. A lot of them are very sick, very, very disturbed people that do this, and it has to do with an inferiority complex brought about by their own inferiority complex, not so much by society moving forward.
Do you consider yourself the second Fuhrer?
I don't even use the word Fuhrer. I'm not a German. I'm an American, as you're a Canadian. I consider myself, in terms of Bolshevism, I would be the Lenin to Marx. And in terms of Christianity, I'm the St. Paul to Hitler's Christ. In other words, I am the spreader, the world spreader of a doctrine which Hitler originated, and it was crucified, dead and buried, and it is now rising.
Are you a Superman, Commander?
I'm not a Superman. No, there's probably people here could whip me. I think that all I am is the offspring of millions of years of evolution which has produced white Christian civilization. I am one example of it, not a Superman. But I think that compared to an Aborigine in Africa who eats his grandmother, and they're still eating people over there, I think I am, and so are you. We're all Supermen compared to those cruds.
Didn't Adolf Hitler believe in Superman?
He said the white race is a master race, and I think that's true.
I would like to turn you to the question of the American Negro.
No, let's go. We've got a little more sympathy there. People don't know about the Jews, but they can...
Now, I want to make sure that people understand that I do not support the use of language like this. I believe that the use of inflammatory language like this is unnecessary, and I am providing this video, again, for educational purposes only. And I want to make sure people understand, I do not agree with Mr. Rockwell on all things. In fact, I very much disagree with him on the fact of a free market economy. I think a free market economy is very bad. It's very bad and counterproductive to the furtherance of Western civilization moving forward.
Sure see Coons.
Just what, indeed, do you plan to do with the American Negro?
I think what should have been done, it's too late now. I used to back the Muslims, because the Muslims cleaned their people up. They wanted a country of their own in Africa. This is what Elijah Muhammad said. I spoke before 9,000 black Muslims in Chicago, and I was cheered. And the reason for it was because we saw eye to eye on the business of giving the Negroes some justice in their own land, not here.
Commander, do you favor the use of violence in dealing with the Negroes?
If the Negroes show us any violence, I sure as hell do. But so long as they remain within the law, I believe it can be done. voluntarily, not by violence. I believe the only way it could have been solved, I think it's too late now, but I think it could have been solved by appropriating some of the billions of dollars we give away to communist nations in foreign aid. If we had given that to our own Negroes, I believe we could have built them their own nation, and they would voluntarily have been eager to go there. Well, I think it's enlisted most Americans, and I bet a lot of course, you people up in Canada, I don't think you have many coons running around up there, do you?
Well, Commander, I wouldn't like to go into a description of what you might describe as a coon, unless you'd like to.
Well, Martin Luther Coon is a good example, I would say. I will say this, if I had the funds to do it, and I could ship 5,000 Negroes, let us call them.
Now, notice the similarity between what he's recommending doing in this instance and what many conservatives are praising the governor of Texas for doing, which is trucking Hispanics, illegal migrants from Hispanic countries, to liberal areas. Now listen to what Mr. Rockwell's saying. This is being implemented today by the governor of Texas.
To your city tomorrow morning, you'd have a Negro problem. And it wouldn't be long before you'd be saying, well, now, what are we going to do about this thing?
You send them up in cattle cars or Greyhound buses, Commander?
Well, I think the Negroes would be more comfortable, most of them in a cattle car.
Yes, but I just wondered which way you'd rather see them go.
Well, I think the Negroes themselves would prefer to go the way they live. I think they'd like to get a couple of wine bottles and their heroin and their numbers game and everything, get in the cattle car where they all crawl all over each other.
Well, Commander, that's not a very good description of the Negroes we have in Canada.
Negroes simply are not fit to associate in modern urban civilization. They just can't make it. A few can. There are a few who are always mixed with white blood, by the way, but real black Negroes, you won't find very many of them who can make the grade in urban civilization.
Well, would you say then that there is no Negro who is really in the same league with Commander Rockwell?
No, sir, I would not. There may be some Negroes who are superior to me. But I would say that the chances are 99 out of 100 that I've got a lot of white blood, like Malcolm X. And I would further say that the average Negro is far inferior to anybody in here. The average Negro, not the special Negro that you might trot out that's a PhD, but the average Negro. You go over here on 7th Avenue and I'll show you thousands of them that are inferior swine.
Commander, your views on Negroes strike me as being viciously extreme. Do you disagree with that characterization?
No, sir. They're not vicious, but they're extreme.
Commander, how do you feel about the allegations that the American Nazi Party has strong homosexual tendencies?
I will say this. In my organization, I have men who were homosexuals. They were sucked into that filth, just like drunkards or dope fiends. And I have been able to rescue them. And I'm not a bit ashamed of that. I'll stand shoulder to shoulder with any one of them any day. The only thing I will not tolerate is a homosexual who is a homosexual.
This is one of your enemies?
That's one of the biggest enemies. I'd rather gas queers than anybody else.
Have you got operatives inside the government?
Yes, sir.
In Congress?
Yep.
In the government of Canada?
I don't know of any in the government of Canada.
Who else would you like to gas besides queers?
Well, I'd like to gas traitors, I've already told you. But queers, to me, queers are traitors to humanity as a whole.
I just wondered if it was a long list of people you'd like to gas.
You put queers up at the top of the list for my money, and that includes a lot of Jews and liberals, I find, are also queers.
Commander, you've already told us.
Now, what's interesting about that is what you have to understand. These Christians that support Israel is a very homosexual nation. Lots of homosexuals in Israel. I just wanted to point that out.
It's your intention to become president of the United States, and
Now, this is from a resource called Jewish Currents, and it's explaining how what's going on in Gaza right now. This is from October 13th, 2023, is a textbook case of genocide, okay? So Israel ordered the besieged population in the northern half of Gaza to evacuate to the south, warning that it would soon intensify its attack. Okay. Israel's campaign to displace Gazans and potentially expel them altogether into Egypt is yet another chapter in the Nakba, in which an estimated 750,000 Palestinians were driven from their homes during the 1948 war that led to the creation of the State of Israel. But the assault on Gaza can also be understood in other textbook terms of genocide unfolding in front of our eyes. This person sees as a scholar of genocide who has spent many years writing about Israeli mass violence against Palestinians. He has written about settler colonialism, which you can see, you click that link when you go to the thing, the distortion of the Holocaust to boost Israeli arms industry and weaponization of anti-Semitism, the weaponization of anti-Semitism. Because if you point out that Zionism is a genocidal, maniacal doctrine bent on exterminating people that are not Jewish, you are seen as an anti-Semite. Now remember, not all Jews are Zionists. Many Jews aren't Zionists. Many Jews, like this gentleman here, are opposed to Zionism. So that's the problem, is by their weaponization of the term anti-Semitism. Mind you, Palestinians are Semitic people. Okay, remember Yahwism. Remember, these are all descendants of the Canaanite people. Okay, accusations to justify Israeli violence against Palestinians and the racist regime of Israeli apartheid, now following Hamas's attack on Saturday and mass murder of more than 1,000 Israeli civilians. The worst of the worst is happening under international law. The crime of genocide is defined by the intent to destroy in whole or in part a national, ethnical, racial, or religious group, as such as noted in the December 1948 UN Convention on the Prevention and Punishment of the Crime of Genocide. In its murderous attack on Gaza, Israel has loudly proclaimed its intent. Israeli Minister of Defense Yoav Gallant declared it in no uncertain terms on October 9th. We are imposing a complete siege on Gaza. No electricity, no food, no water, no fuel. Everything is closed. We are fighting. Now, this is them dehumanizing the Palestinians. And they did this with their description of the Canaanites in the Torah. They are fighting, quote, human animals, and they will act accordingly. Okay? The UN Genocide Convention lists 5 acts that fall under its definition. Israel is currently perpetrating 3 of these in Gaza. 1, killing members of a group. 2, causing serious bodily or mental harm to members of the group. 3, deliberately inflicting on the group conditions of life calculated to bring about its physical destruction in whole or in part. The Israeli Air Force, by its own account, has so far dropped more than 6,000 bombs on Gaza, which is one of the most densely populated areas in the world. Okay, and this goes on. You can read this on your own if you'd like. Recently, an Israeli politician had stated that he wanted to turn Gaza into Dresden. Now, nobody knows about Dresden, because nobody knows dick about history anymore, because nobody learns anything about anything anymore. So we're going to talk about Dresden now. I'm going to end this video, there's one video in this series, on this video here talking about Dresden and what happened in Dresden, which was abominable and inhuman.
A human chain stretched protectively around Dresden tonight to mourn its dead. The German president linked arms with the Duke of Kent, and the Bishop of Coventry was there to remember the city's victims for the 75th time.
In the greatest blitz on Germany, British bombers head for Dresden.
I've seen brutality on its highest levels, but nothing prepared me for what I saw at Dresden. Nothing.
Victor Gregg joined the army in 1937. He was a prisoner of war in the city when the bombers came.
Now they hit Dresden hardest of all.
Dresden had no defenses, neither did its people. 25,000 died in a single...
So this was a civilian city attacked by the murderous British regime.
Night.
Women, children, old people, refugees, all being blasted to death with no means of fighting back, nothing to defend themselves with, and still the incessant bombs coming down.
Allied forces pounded the city with almost 4,000 tons of explosives and bombs, creating a firestorm that tore through its streets, stripping it to its skeleton.
I was ashamed of being British, a feeling of guilt by association, because I'd seen all this cruelty. All these people were being slaughtered.
They are memories impossible to extinguish, but Victor's guilt eased when he returned to Dresden 40 years later and met a German survivor.
She put her arm around me and she wouldn't let me go. What we was doing together, we was reliving what had happened together. I think that I've been forgiven by the German people.
He displays bravery, but his eyes have seen unimaginable horrors, events that have shaped who he is today, and what this town will never forget. Lucy Watson, News at 10.
So, when I come back, I'm going to discuss the justification for genocide in the Yahwist cult. And that's all for this video.